Benjamin has spent a lifetime exploring spiritual traditions, searching for the unifying elements that connect us. More than 15 years ago, his search led him to the gongs, which seem to be a portal for connecting with the oneness that connects and permeates all things. He has developed a unique way of playing gongs as well as singing bowls, and other instruments to craft an immersive sound bath experience. Benjamin lives in the northern Chicago suburbs, hosts gong events all over the Chicago area and throughout the year. Cary and Lisa Cochrane are in-laws. This is their son-in-law, and Kate is online, his wife, and his two children. He has to tell a little bit about the story about the children, their names. I think that's very interesting. Ben has been blessed in learning the ways of gong from Richard Rudis, is I saying it correctly, who granted him the rare ability and legal use of the term gong bath. He is a gong master, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what this is about. I've been through two of these myself, and I am always interested in going back, especially look forward to Benjamin's leadership. We will be doing that here at the church on Thursday, February 22nd at 6:30. Probably in the sanctuary, but we're going to test out different places. So put that on your calendar. We hope others can come. Professionally, Benjamin is a director of online executive education programs at Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Previously, he has worked in creating online courses for numerous universities and corporate clients, working as a creative director and concept artist in the video game and entertainment industries, and taught university-level visual and performance arts. So we look forward to this conversation. I thought I would begin by asking Benjamin just to tell us a little bit about your growing up.
Okay.
A little bit about your parents' influence, both of them, on your spirituality, because I think it's a testimony to a beginning diversity of the perspectives.
Sure. If I might, I just wanted to say thank you for having me, for the honor, and everybody in the congregation for having me, honoring me with allowing me to speak here. And then just let you know kind of my tone. I try to land somewhere between George Carlin and Mr. Rogers, or Robin Williams and Edward Watts. So I know it's humor and entertainment, but to try and it's full spectrum of divinity that's there. But to start with my parents, I was really blessed with a very interesting feast of all different kinds of cultures and religions growing up. My father is a devout Catholic and loves Catholic and Latin Mass and the pageantry of Catholic Mass. And he's trained as a biochemist and a classical guitarist. He was a studio musician for Capitol Records at Ovation Records here, and was also worked for Interlake Steel testing waste output in the environment, and also working for Monsanto, helping with the warehouse, and then sometimes working in the labs making NutraSweet and things like that. But love, and he's still proud, and I love it, long-haired, bearded musician, and a very open-minded spiritual guy. I know he did some transcendental meditation in college and was always very open-minded. And our Catholic Church, St. Irenaeus, which used to be in Park Forest. I was an altar boy there for 7 years. And beautiful, open-minded, Father O'Sullivan was great there, and just same sort of thing of bringing all different kinds of stuff. My mother is a Cuban, how would you say, her family were some of the first Marquis to Spain, and my great-grandmother was into theosophy at the beginning of that whole era when New Age was coming up, and H.B. Blavatsky, but she really liked Jiddu Krishnamurti and how he sort of projected and stood in like, let's just be nice. Like, why do we need all this other stuff? And so her daughter then, my grandmother, Sarah, in Cuba, then they got into the work of like Carlos Castaneda and Stanislav Grof, and just all these different kinds of spiritualities that were because they were free thinkers, were exploring. And in Cuba too, there was a huge population of Chinese people, so we grew up with traditional Chinese medicine and the influence of Chinese culture, which you don't think of necessarily when you think of Cuban stuff. But also there was African influences in Santeria and, so it's this sort of, and my mother is a Jungian psychologist and an artist and just a wonderful person. And she introduced me to a lot of interesting things growing up. Like I would go to a Catholic school and be an altar boy and then come home and hum with my mother. And my mother taught me how to meditate as a very young child, having me meet her in the hum and feeling the frisson, the wonderful hair-raising feeling of humming with another person and following them go up and down. In my bedroom, my parents got divorced when I was very young. It was an amicable divorce. They didn't love each other still to this day. They have their marriages and families. But my room at my father's was a recording studio. And so I slept in the top half of a bunk bed or above a mixing board inside of a fully decked out professional recording studio and got to sit at my father's feet and listen to, he was a student of Andre Segovia's. My father was incredible, still is, but he's played so much and so long, he's actually had to have all of his fingers restrung because he plays 6 hours a day for more than 40, 50 years now. Incredible. I loved bringing high school kids to my father and watching their, oh, you like Metallica? Come over. And then we would put like a Metallica song on and he'd be like, got it. And they would just draw us on the floor, And my mother was this giant glowing heart that any weirdo I brought home from high school, because those are my people, she would just welcome and draw out the most beautiful things in them. And so I have this lineage of very strong, independent. My grandmother from Cuba ran her own newspaper. She was part of the National Ballet. My grandfather was a lawyer. His father was a Supreme Court justice in Cuba. But he also ran the National Ballet. It's kind of a rascal kind of partly because he liked to dance and did with the big sleeves and then, they did that kind of stuff. But also because he could meet hot dancer girls. Where he met my grandmother, who was a very strong, independent woman, very free thinking. And when they moved to the States, they escaped the communist thing and made a whole new life here. But throughout my life, I was afforded that from my parents. But even my mother's group, they were affiliated with Baha'i. My neighbor was a Baptist Christian reverend. And my mom had friends that were Jewish, and I got influences from Hindu, and I've been in Mormon, Mormon, Hindu, Native American, Taoist, every kind of Buddhism, Zen, Tibetan, just everything. And when I was young, I wanted to be a wizard, a monk, or a priest. It was the thing I wanted to do the most. As a young boy, as a young person, you have this beautiful, undomesticated light that it was the highest good I could imagine doing, from my exposure, it was to be a holy person. So and then I would find too that being a child of divorce, I would go from household to household and they were very different. One house spoke Spanish and was much more humble means. And the other house was a very established American, Irish, German family, much more conservative and well-established and kind of, just a little bit less wild and loud than the Cubans were, and a little bit more reserved and Irish German. And then I would go to other places where people's, all these different, I'd go to Catholic church during the week. I'd go to Baptist where they'd get up and sing and be very dynamic. And then I'd go to these Buddhist things and have conversations with Native Americans and on and on. Everybody accepted me, but I would also notice that there was sort of a little bit of boundary making. I was in lectures at one of the Christian places where they talked about the rapture. That was introduced the idea of the rapture, and it was my friend's father who actually called out that, if you are of a slightly different class of like you're Catholics, you're not considered Christian, and we would have to essentially kill you and hunt you down because you're not of the right group. And I was like, but you say you love me and I play with your children, and I was very young, and started to see that there was something that was awry in the separation. But I found that I could go from population to population and be loved and accepted without question, but without the label of I was part of this group. I could be part of every group. And that every group was, even, it was like 5, 6, that every group was doing the same thing, be nice, love each other, cooperate, play nice. And so I just started to find that that was probably where the good stuff was at, and that was where I focused. And
But you also felt where the bad stuff was when you had that statement, I would think.
yeah, oh yeah, and then,
Shake you and wonder about, there are other forms of spirituality that aren't quite as uplifting.
yes, oh, absolutely, and different aspects, and that it was, you would find these minglings of, and it was each individual too, it was like everybody's perspective and how they interpreted it. And that was the thing about the sort of metaphorical, as a child, I was very frustrated. I was like, can you just tell me what the thing is? I wanted to be a Jesuit or a high Tibetan monk, so I could get to the libraries and just get to the point. Like I was, I really wanted, like, what is the ultimate truth? Somebody has this written down in the book, someone has to have figured this out in, thousands or millions of years. Why does it have to be so metaphorical? And, got very good at reading Old English and intensely dry translations of Tibetan and Sanskrit and things as a little kid, and like reading the DSM-3 and 4 and stuff. It's like a lot of psychology. My mom's college psychology books I used to read too. And yeah, and then the training of art too was really important, and seeing, being present and being aware visually. And then listening to my father, a lot of the exchange with my father was through what came out of the music and the movement of being in a church or being in a musical space, hearing my father just, fusion, jazz, classical music, emit these ineffable, non-language, moving things through sound, or even just that humming with my mother could be some, or that being in a church and when the organ hits those vibrating, massive tones, and how the acoustics of the building and the light, and the color, and all the things that we do, the frankincense and these sorts of things that were, the language seemed to separate people because of its specificity and its interpretation. And so when I eventually came to find the gongs, which was at the introduction of my mother, she's like, I saw this guy do this thing with these gongs at St. Francis in Frankfurt, and you have to go see this. I know you will love this. And I was immediately dismissive in my youth, in my arrogant 20s, was like, I don't want to go in a room with a hippie banging a garbage can lid while a bunch of people in sweatpants lay on the floor and make up some nonsense. I was very dismissive of it. And my mother was like, just, I think you'll like it, give it a try. And she was persistent for about 2 years. Every time he would come through town, she's like, he's coming. You should go do this. I think you'll like it. And I was like, I don't want it. This is ridiculous. This is strange. I don't want to, And I was like, eventually it came and was like, Mom, you introduced me to all sorts of things that are very interesting and, beneficial. So I'll give it, all I gotta do is lay there. I just go in a room and I lay on the floor and I just sit there for an hour. I can do that. And I did it. And, I had a very dramatic response. I had a very interesting experience, which I thought I had fallen asleep. I was like, oh, okay, this guy's just, sort of doing a sleight of hand and claiming that, if you have some mental movements or you fall asleep or whatever, that's what I did. And like, I grew up in a music recording situation. I've heard every instrument, been in front of walls of speakers and enormous sound in churches, and I've been moved, but never had an instrument do this. So I became fascinated and going back to just sort of like, okay, is this a real thing that's happening? And I eventually started to see Richard Rudy's play every time he come to Chicago, like 3 times a year. And for 7 years, I sat at his side and just absorbed what was coming through the vibrations. And I kept begging him to teach me. And he would just say, just receive, like just watch and receive. And I practiced meditation very seriously every day for years, since I was like 12 or 13 or something, to just be in a state of receptivity and sort of get out of the way. And I know I'm projecting and talking a lot, but I find that the opposite, sort of the Quaker method of just sit and get out of the way and open. And then if you're quiet, it's like watching a movie. If someone is talking through the whole movie, how are you absorbing the movie? And we're talking through our own movie all of the time. So I have to practice shutting up so I can be in the movie and listening. Watching and looking at art is an invitation to project, but listening to music is the best way I can find to immediately be quiet, or to listen to just anything like the air conditioner humming or the light bulb buzzing, this tiny, the ants making the blades of grass clatter, you know, these
So
sorts
when
of.
you meditate, do you then focus on one sound or one piece or
I just, so sometimes, yeah, there's a million
ways
modalities.
of meditation? Yeah.
But yes, I just try to sit and just listen, and that's a very quick way to get in, is to just sit and just try and find the smallest, tiniest part of the sound. And then sort of ride that and see where it sort of leads you, and then why are you drawn to that? And then I learned it from the beatniks. There's a book I had, from a beatnik, I forget which one it was. But he invited you to explore that this idea of the sound, that might be an Eastern thing, that the sounds are actually emitting from you, that every sound that you're experiencing is being emitted from you. I mean, sort of it is, and that our sensory parts are actually creating an illusion in our brain, and that our reality generating system is interpreting this plethora of overwhelming sensory information that we filter and govern down. And so we can agree that you can hear my voice,
Mhm.
but the true reality, according to science and some mystical traditions, apparently very different and much more profound.
The sound is working more at an unconscious level, to use that word.
Yeah,
Pre-verbal even, maybe?
yeah,
Some
multidimensional.
multidimensional.
Yeah, and there was a radio lab made a really impact. I mean, when I talked about mammalian language, that every mammal mother
Just
makes the
listening.
same coo. They all go, ooh, ooh, good boy, I love you. It has the same melodic
Right.
flow. And even in tonal languages, this is why, it's attributed to like Asian cultures where they're so good at violin and fretless instruments, is this tonal, awareness.
It's very interesting because Western spirituality tends to be very heady, very much into words and dogma and doctrine. And I think some people have this experience like you did, even with the sound immersion experiences, that this is just kind of out there.
Yeah.
But if you look at Judaism, there are branches of Judaism where the very word, the letter of each part of the scripture have power
Sanskrit,
and
six
meaning.
syllables.
Sanskrit,
Om.
And scientists, I heard this, I don't have backup reference to back this up, but that monks, Jewish, I mean, Christian and Buddhist often chant in B flat. Well, the universe supposedly
Yeah.
hums in B flat. So,
Yeah, there's claims
It's-
that like the
it's-
Earth is a C sharp.
right,
The vibrate, the planet vibrates, they calculate with math, they sort of calculate the orbit, and they use an octave math to bring
you've
that
got the
into a.
references, I just heard
Yeah.
it somewhere.
Yeah,
Hey, pastors are bad about dropping things and saying
yeah,
them.
but see, this is the
back.
trap though, this is the trap, is that this is the sort of, and I want to use, this is. And it's not to fault, and don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so I tell people come to me, they're like, oh, now I found Eastern stuff, well, that's great, but. You're just, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, by that I mean, that when we try to put it into words, and we try to put it in science, we try to choose a frequency. You're taking what is the divine, which can't fit in our head. It's like the Allah idea, like, don't draw it because you can't contain this. My symbol for the divine is a question mark, right? For me, that's the most beautiful symbol of the divine is that,
Mystery.
yeah, and just receive, just not know, and receive the not knowing, which is the catalyst for all of the yearning for the knowing that fills you. But the idea of that the words in the language come short. And so I try to find the ways that it doesn't come short, and so the vibration, when I do the gongs too, I don't say anything in the beginning. I don't seed anyone with any context, or just lay down and try and hold on to listening, and then afterwards we'll talk about what happened in your context,
Well, it's very interesting because many of us who come from a Christian perspective, I think a lot of what's going on is people are beginning to open up a little bit and branch out and say, let me see if there are elements of other faiths I can pull into my faith. And I'm one of those people. Barbara Brown Taylor wrote a wonderful book on interfaith dialogue where she taught a class up in northern Georgia to conservative students coming into college, and we're gonna be using her book on practices of the faith and during the Lenten season in here. But she had, she talked about, at this point in her life, she's older, and she said, I could get started in Hinduism and never figure out even the beginning of it. So I know I'm firmly Christian, but I want to recognize where God is beyond
Yeah,
the limits that have been drawn for me traditionally, and I want to open myself up, and she's done that and done that for her students. So, but you've had this beginning where it was almost like, you didn't have just all this dogma, you had just such a variety from the start.
yeah, yeah, because I tried to go at all of them, even when I was young, like I was very young and I was like, I don't wanna have sex, I don't wanna smoke, I don't wanna drink, I don't wanna drive a car. My parents were like, I'm sure that they would like to have grandchildren, but my mother and father wisely encouraged me at that point. I'm like, I'm gonna either go to Tibet and live in the mountains and be a monastery, I'm gonna go to, Rome and I'm gonna be a Jesuit. And work at the Vatican, and they're like, why don't you read this book on every world religion? And just learn about all of them, so you can make an informed decision, and I never stopped informing myself. And going back to sort of the written word, or the science, or the frequencies, those are wonderful, ambitious attempts to relate a beautiful experience that a person has through some sort of context or language or system. And it's a very sort of, from what I know, stereotypically male approach to try and put these things into words and boxes that can translate and give it to another person so that they can use that to get to the same outcome. And I found that is a person's context. It's their life, it's their family, it's their heritage. It's, like, I am Christian, that statement, this is my context.
Right.
Right? Because when you look at I latched onto the definitions of God of like the all. And I go, okay, well, if it's all encompassing, then, and I would ask questions in church that would make the nuns get so frustrated, where they'd be like, if you didn't believe in Jesus, then you would go to hell, And I go, well, what about Jesus' grandma? What if, like, she didn't meet him yet, so because grandma, that's, go to Mother Superior. But I would ask questions too, about if God is everything, then why isn't God also the Hindus or the animists or the, if it's everything, if it is manifest in all things, and that's why, like, I love Saint Francis so much, it's in every blade of grass, it's in, and so I just kept returning, whenever I would get lost or caught in context, I would return to that. And sound, for me, was one of those things where it's beyond language. It is the one sensory thing that it bypasses any filter. You are subject to sound. If you sit in a symphony, you're gonna feel those feelings. You're gonna immediately translate. That's why I like Hildegard von Bingen, or like church music or the organ. When you make a sound to another person, it can have language on top. I don't ever listen to the lyrics. I can sing every tune, but I don't know the words.
Right.
And the words often can be paradoxical or dichotomous to the sound.
Right.
And the mixture of those two things is also the tension, is this beauty. And again, like, my idea of the divine is this paradox. If it's not a paradox, it's not true. If you don't have when I was younger, I used to get upset that the Catholic Church had Jesus murdered on the cross. Like, this is my house of love. Here's a man bleeding dead on the wall. And I was like, that does not seem like it resonates. That feels dissonant to me. And then you have to dive into the context, understand the passion and where that was coming from, and go, oh, I understand the tension and the paradox in these things, and it births a sort of different feeling.
Interesting, because when I went to theology school, I never heard the word paradox. Growing up in Mississippi, I had an okay education, but paradox? What's paradox? And all of a sudden, it all opened up for me.
Yeah.
It was one of the most important words. I'm glad to hear you say that. It created new possibilities and opened my mind and heart. And it's very important to understand that in the cross. And I'll preach a sermon pretty soon. It's going to talk about, well, the symbol of the cross is a symbol of death, but it's also a symbol of life. And how is that the case?
Right.
And how do we Christians understand that? Because we've had some very bad ways of hearing that. But I really like this part that you're talking about, recognizing that people need structure and some basis out of which they operate. You're not trying to undo that for people. You have this gift of having grown up with so much diversity, and you still had to work through some of that, right?
Oh, still, yeah.
You're still working with that.
Yeah.
So, avoiding a label of Christian is a gift for you, because to do that, not to do that, what might be containing and prevent you from a deeper spiritual split, I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, it's not that I avoid, it's that I avoid any label, because I try to, align with that concept of the divine that is spoken of in everything, which is that it is everything. So I'm a member of everything,
Right.
you know, and that's, to me, you know, why I like congregational church and like open-minded, you know, and that, there's a discussion in that contrast. I think too, in the modern world, we see this polarity in the political system and things, and we've lost the idea that the differences, you know, I talk a lot about the unifying thing, but the unifying thing is a paradox of we're unified in our differences. And the differences allow us to communicate to find a better outcome. Debate is not that I win, I'm right, you're wrong. It's how can we alchemize? How can we, you know, put salt and sugar together to make the most delicious treat, right? But if it's just salt or it's just sugar, you get sick, but you put salt and sugar together, you want to keep eating that thing, right? And so it's those sorts of like, the gong is sound, but a good number of my patients, or not patients, my participants or whatever, the people who come to this, who bless me with the ability to do this, can't hear, they're deaf, and it's a physical vibration. And I don't ever record it or transmit it over, because it's like watching a video of a massage. It's a physical vibratory, experience.
But it's also pretty music.
It can be, but it's to some people. I mean, so, there's moments that it's a din.
Dissonant.
It's dissonant and it's a din. But akin to Tibetan music, it sounds like this, like, it's very flatulent, sort of brassy, bombastic clatter. It doesn't sound to a Western ear, it's not musical and lyrical. It's not. It's something else. But or shamanic drumming, relentless. But if you are able to receive what is happening in that space, it's more of a biological, somatic thing that opens you to the receptivity of sort of a divine mystical thing. But you have to sort of, I don't know, be present for it.
Well, I was listening to a report on psychedelics this morning. They're trying it up and what they can do for you, but sounds like even a safer way to go than some of the risk involved in something like that for someone wanting to really get beyond their thinking. Because I think I shared this when I did my spiritual biography, how I struggled with speaking to God. I feel like I'm just listening to the voice in my head and it's repeating it to God. It doesn't feed me like it used to. Not that there are times I don't do that, but I want to do it when it comes more from the heart. And somehow meditation and chant are becoming more important to me in filling that gap. And I'm interested in, maybe we ought to open, or we got a little bit more time. Before we get into discussion. We got about 30 more minutes, so let's wait and we'll let you keep talking, but
we can talk about that and
okay,
circle
sure.
back.
I'll let you
So you want to talk about chanting and
Yeah.
sound and?
and meditation. That would be interesting.
Sure. So, so I meditated for a long time. And when I was younger, I started in Zen Buddhism, which is like the most kind of obtuse, difficult, because the idea of the way they teach you is you have to figure it out on your own and they won't tell you. At least this was my experience. You just sit there and you know, and then it'll happen. Well, it could be 5 minutes or it could be 100 years, but just sit. It's like, as a 13-year-old, you're like, that's very difficult. And then I would read koans. You know, what is the sound of one hand clapping, or what is a dog's Buddha nature? And it's like, you're like, you have no context. You grew up with Catholicism and you're like, what is this? I don't understand these puzzles. And so I went through this process of trying to meditate, trying to do all these things and sit in the right way. And really it was one day I just got very frustrated. And similar to the story of the Buddha or the Venerable Jane, like I tried all these ascetic practices and I just was so frustrated. Like, I'm just gonna sit here till I figure it out and just count my breaths. And then I had a very profound experience that lasted for like 6 hours. And meditation, there's many different modalities of ways to meditate. And in different Christian traditions, it's present. You know, there's types of Quaker meeting houses, there's Ignatian Jesuit stuff, there's even the music of the Gregorians, that there's all these different ways to approach it. And the way that I really found was the most beneficial was to, again, enter into a state of receptivity and paying attention to what's going on in your mind. And, you start with basically just looking at what your thoughts are and just hearing them and taking inventory, whether those thoughts are benefiting you or not benefiting you. And you don't judge it. You just, is this beneficial or is this not beneficial? And you just leave it at that. And the magic is that your brain, your mind, your whatever, your being starts to automatically prune those things out. I think of it like a garden, that you just have a garden and there's things growing in it that are good and things that are growing in it that are maybe, weeds that shouldn't be there. And there might be things you think are weeds, like a dandelion that actually is very medicinal and is good for you. And you might have thought that it was a weed, and been like, that weed is actually really helping me. And that thing that I thought was a nuisance, or that experience I had that was painful or traumatic, actually was a mess. Or that this thing that I thought was really great and making me ambitious and achieved might actually be me avoiding something else. Or it might be, and you only get that by just sitting and listening to what is going on inside. And then kind of following, they call it the golden line or the golden thread, or following it to its root. And then seeing, where did that idea first come from? Was it a person, it's usually a person in your life. And then you get to make a choice of, do I want to continue to uphold that input? And can I change how I respond? And then you change your whole reality.
We talked about internal family systems,
Yeah,
and something I have used in therapy, been through in therapy, and I find that really helpful. Listening to the different voices, honoring them.
yeah.
But that's a meditation practice.
It is, yeah, and the interesting thing was when I was young and I learned about like Roman and Greek mythology, I thought it was just a boring exercise in old stories. And when I learned about internal family systems and they characterized, or the work of James Hillman, archetypal and alchemical psychology, that these personas of these polytheistic religions were sort of personas. They were these boiled down parts of ourselves, and they were paradoxical. And that like this, how could this God, like a Zeus or whatever, also do these horrible, violent atrocities, but also be considered a divine, being and respected? But then when you look at these personas inside you, you have a drill sergeant that beats you up all the time, but also this drill sergeant is protecting you, right? And then you can work with that part and talk to that part. And I love the book as a young man, Conversations with God, and the practice of just having a conversation with the voice inside. And the polytheistic funnel or perspective or lens affords you to be able to talk and sort of bucket these different parts of yourself, the judge or the protector or the wounded child or the happy child or, the Messiah, all these different things. And you can talk to them and see how they interact with each other. And you have a whole family going on in you that's going on all the time. And these are sort of these divine things. They're, you can't touch them, but they're there in all of us all the time. And, but what I really think about is internal family systems. See, what I stick to is, okay, but there's the self, the capital S.
Yeah.
Self, which is the background field. When all those personas go away, or, who's the one watching this show on TV? Who's the one, when I go to sleep, decides that, all right, everybody, he's not gonna know that there's a monster in the closet, but he's gonna get terrified by the monster in the closet, and then he's gonna wake up and he's gonna be disturbed by the dream, and he's gonna have 10 years of therapy about this. And then 10 years later, while at the grocery store waiting at the checkout, he's gonna have an aha eureka moment. And we're gonna orchestrate all of this, starting with this dream, and it's gonna be a 10-year process. And we're gonna just silently watch as he goes through all of this nonsense to get to this end, and we're aware. And I go, what is that thing? And that's the capital S self. That's the sort of divine. And who is the, I don't want to say puppet master, but it's how many levels, how many people that I'm listening to my thoughts, who's listening to me, listening to my thoughts, who's listening to me, and how far does it go? And again, mantra, divine music, jogging, doing a craft, being present with a child or a dog or gardening or going for a walk. All these methods are meditative practices that quiet you to receive this thing, and that thing to me always just is like, oh, even saying it, even just referencing it, like
Well, and there's also ego, that part of us that looks through, that has some sense, I get to make some decisions here
Yeah.
about the voices and how, and try to, I'm not a kid anymore, I have some ability to distance and have perspective,
Yeah,
which is equally important at some level, but there's something deeper, you're talking about self, it's God working,
yeah,
or something, to put a word on it.
yeah,
The question working.
Yeah.
Within us, to create, awakenings in us.
and that's why too, it's treacherous to try and boil things down to, this is the way, this is the path, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, or the way that they do it is right, or the way that they do it wrong, that this is an unpleasant experience and I want this to stop, or why is this happening to me? Or, you know, the idea of unanswered prayers being greatest gifts, like I really wanted that relationship to work, and then, no, you didn't, that was a horrible relationship. Be glad that it's over and gone, and then be glad for all the things that you learned by having your irons thrust in that fire over and over again. And I don't assume to be anywhere wise enough to know this blind switchback, zigzaggy, crazy path that it puts us on through our life to learn these things. And, you know, it's treacherous to try and, that's why I do the gongs. I don't have to say anything. I don't usually do this because it's so treacherous to put things into words. I just go, and everybody gets what they need. It's great. I mean, I just, as I was telling you, I keep the pool clean. I'm God's pool boy, right? I keep the water crystal clear. If you want to do the backstroke or cannonballs or water ballet or, you know, or hold your breath as long as you can, that's how you interact with the water. I just try to provide very clean, beautiful pool, you know?
Greg, you had,
I'm noticing, and I'm getting the feeling, there's a vibration, I think.
yeah.
It's like meta
Let's have
level
time.
thinking. Thank you, Ben. I'm sure it's
And I will have to
stirring up a
leave,
lot of questions.
I will have to leave early as usual because I have worship to get ready for now, so.
Okay.
I'll leave
Well,
that.
I see that JS, you raised your hand. If you want to unmute yourself and other people, please let us know. Let's open this up. I want to hear questions for Ben and reflections, please. JS? You can unmute yourself. There she is.
Good morning. What I like about being God's pool boy is I'm a person who lives through experience. And when it comes to something like meditation, there's a whole raft of experience there that one can engage in. For example, there's one meditation I learned is how to eat a raisin in 5 minutes. And if you think about a raisin, how long does it take you to eat a raisin? You know, a couple of seconds maybe. But taking the process and slowing it down so that it literally takes you 5 minutes to eat it engages your senses and your sense of spiritual vibration in an entirely different way as you relate to that raisin. Cooking is another one.
No, that's wonderful. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you,
thank you for sharing that. Yes, one thing I would love, I once sat and watched a flower bloom the whole way through without moving. And I encourage everybody, if you've never, like, I was a large orchid and it bloomed over like an hour. But then like eating a raisin for 5 minutes, you know, this sort of, you call it tantric practice, but it's just being so present with the beauty and the bounty of every little minute thing. As a kid, people would be like, I never got bored because you could just look at a leaf, right? And the leaf is just this, there's another word, paradox one that Jeff Braun really liked, that was fractal. And so the idea of a fractal is that everything in the universe is like an infinite tunnel. And you can just point your awareness and with a sort of the right mindset, it goes on forever. And yeah, my mom says she remembers that. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing, JS.
Thoughts, yes?
Well, I had a recent experience. I went to a retreat at St. Augustine's in Wilmette, and I met with the spiritual director just to explore that option. And she said, well, what do you, who do you see God as today? And it was like this door went down. And I went, that's a very weird experience. The door came down when you asked that question. And I said, Jesus, for me right now, I believe, but I'm not sure, but I believe he's an equal prophet with many of the other prophets, and that he's a portal, a doorway. And God, the big guy, is less attainable for me. But I said, the Holy Spirit right now really works for me. And maybe it's an age thing, but I feel like the Holy Spirit is the wind, the rain, the gong, however you find that. And it's also that God within. So that was an interesting age 72 enlightenment thing. But the other thing is this, talking about letters. I don't know if either of you know what the meaning or the sound of Aleph in the Hebrew alphabet, but Paulo Coelho, I think is his name, wrote a book called Aleph. And Aleph, one stroke means the divine, and the other stroke of the letter means divine become human or becomes man or brought to earth. And I think that place where they meet in that actual letter, and I'd like to know, I don't know how to study this or know what that sound is, but that place where those two meet is that place in here where we can access the spirit. And it would be nice if we could all do it in some way that we can communicate it and understand it without all the other stuff.
Namaste. The essence of the phrase namaste is I honor the divine spark that is in you, that is also in me, that is in all things. And it's sort of like God saying hi to God. Or have you ever heard of like it's like God is under the surface and like poking little fingers through, and we're all God's fingertips. And namaste is the idea of the spark creating the spark and sort of like giving each other a link. Like, isn't this a fun game we're playing? Like you're being you and I'm being me, and we're pretending that we don't know, so we can play this game of reminding each other of the beauty of things, you know.
Nancy, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I don't know what I wanted to say. But I keep thinking of whales. I have no idea why, but of course it has to do with the sonar sound, but then I think the whales are on their own package, their own universe, and they have nothing to do with me. But of course, that's where I'm at. I haven't gotten any further. Does it mean anything?
Yes, so I have this tattoo on my arm that is a symbol of everything is interconnected. And I'll give you a little meditation, it's fun, it's my favorite, like, so sit down and just breathe in and out. And just pay attention to the breathing in and out, right? But try and find the boundary where the molecules and the oxygen that is outside, that enters your body, your lungs, and goes into your cells, where that boundary is, where it stops being outside and it becomes you and inside. And then when you exhale, try and feel, like really try and find the boundary where when you exhale that air, that it stops being you. And then realize that, well, that air, you know, where's it coming from? Well, it's coming from a tree that's breathing in your carbon dioxide, processing it, and then exhaling it to you. And then you keep going and go, well, that air, how long has that air been here? That's the air that the bird down the street and the squirrel is breathing. And so the bird and the squirrel cells are commingling with mine every minute. And as I'm walking through the house and the dust mites in my eyebrows and the billions and trillions of creatures of the collective that I am are all breathing this air and then breathing it out. And where does the individual begin and end if I'm a pile of a trillion things in a system of organs that are all in this beautiful ballet and we're constantly pumping in and out and exchanging constantly, and even the molecules in the room are shuffling and exchanging. You and I are exchanging subatomic particles just by being in the close space. And as you sit and you breathe, but really do this is kind of what Jess is saying. It's an activity. There's a lot of intellectualizing in spirituality, but it's a practice. It's like, you can't run a marathon in your mind. You need to get up and start.
Yes, but I'm not smart enough to think of all that, but.
But you don't have to, but you don't have to, I'm just giving you the fruit, after the, so if you just sit and you just explore, then it will come. Then you'll go like, oh, wait, where does
Yeah.
it stop?
Well, I do a little of that because when I ask the question, I take this up
Yeah,
and I start digging. So is that similar?
it can be. The thing is that I'm not gonna tell you that there's a way, because they're all the way.
Thank you.
Who else? Who else can speak?
I had a really interesting experience, this summer. I was out walking in the woods and, I needed to exercise, and so there was a big tree right there. I need to stretch, and so I put my hands against the tree. And all of a sudden I thought, I really like this tree. I think I'm just gonna put my arms around the tree. I put my arms around the tree, and this is really remarkable. Put my arms around the tree, I closed my eyes, and I just leaned into it. I felt like my body was coming out, that I was coming out away. It's like you would imagine yourself being in a spaceship and leaving the earth and coming out like this. I felt myself going out like that, and all of a sudden, I felt like I was merged with a tree. It was an unbelievable experience.
Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, this is reality. This is where we live. This is like where I go, like we're busy watching Super Bowl commercials, but like this is really where, and that's not, that's part of the divine game too. It's all part of it, but these things this is my thing, is like bring those sorts of things up.
Yeah.
And like talking about whales and trees move at a different time signature than we do.
Right,
And plants do. That's what I learned from the orchid. It's like, oh, it was alien and terrifying. I mean, that's when I watched the flower bloom, because it was like, hi, I see you and I'm here and I'm a thing. And I'm aware that you're here. And I'm like, the plant is a person and it's aware and it's living and it's moving. And as I stared at it, it's covered in little hairs and it's made out of organs and, and it's like its skin is this tissue, and it's this fuzzy little thing and it's opening, and it had this very erotic, beautiful, because it was emitting this fragrance and, it was just this like beautiful, sensual thing. And the tree, I think about stories of Jesus and Buddha and all these messiahs. They all sit under a tree for a prolonged period of time. And I really wonder if they just slowed down to tree, like Lord of the Rings. They talk about the trees speak so slowly that you have to listen to them for a week to tell you a sentence. And so if they can sit down by a tree for a long period of time, and there's also science that shows that trees speak by exhaling certain chemicals.
right.
And every genius spent time walking around trees, and there's a book called The Nature Principle by Richard Root that I love. And it talks about how mental illness and handicaps and all these psycho killers, you put them in the woods or in the garden, and immediately the bacteria that's emitted from the plants calms and soothes them within like 5 minutes.
I find that. We have a house in the middle of trees everywhere, and I walk there every single day, and it's just trees. And as soon as I get there, it's like,
Yeah,
no stress.
but you had that moment of receptivity. You weren't
Oh, it's
projecting into it.
unbelievable.
You weren't looking for the tree to connect you. You just had a gap where it was quiet, and then
But I
it.
think it's interesting, because I kept looking, every time I walked, I would see that same tree. There was something about that tree that was drawing me in.
Mhm.
It's hard to describe.
It's like a
You
guy
can't-
at a party.
Right.
It's like a person at a party.
Right,
And I would say that's their vibration. That's their heartbeat. It's how you know someone's lying,
could be, yeah.
or someone's dangerous, or that a dog is not okay, or you should maybe not pet that cat, or maybe you should. Or you should go talk to that person at that party. There's a ineffable, invisible thing that we're doing.
Connection.
Intuition, but I would say, like, if you wanna put it in a, scientific, like, we know that heart rhythms and vibrations and
We're not
you're
paying
emitting
attention
this
to it.
stuff, but then there's other stuff that we don't know, that we haven't put in we haven't labeled yet, we haven't found yet, and I always go
We
like.
haven't measured it.
Yeah, and just because we haven't, that's the very feminine that I'm so grateful for all the women in my life, is the welcoming of the just unknown chaos. And I mean chaos in the most wonderful way, like everything that you don't know, be open to that. Man, we've been critical.
Good point, good reminder, our green team reads a lot of good books about the environment, and you just reminded me, I have to say, Richard Powers, a former U of I professor, wrote something called The Overstory.
Oh, yeah.
Great book.
Yeah, anybody who hasn't, please,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to be reminded that.
What's the name?
Overstory, the overstory.
Yeah, someone's asking about the book, we say the book again,
Yes,
it's not online, I'd like to know what that is. Or very.
I'll put it in. There's been, trees
there's
that
also
have been
one-
alive since Rome, the Roman Empire.
Ben, you mentioned one, someone's asking.
Oh, the nature principle,
Okay.
that one too.
Okay.
This is,
Well, there's a pause, let me jump in. Thank you, Ben, for being here. There's just a remarkable alignment between this session today and the worship service. And this is not a plug for the worship service, but I guess it is. But this is, we did not plan this.
No.
It just happened. I mean, the theme of the worship service today is spirituality. And we're gonna do some practices with the children during the service, but anyway. Those online can find us on YouTube, Connected Congregational Church. But those of you who are not WCC participants, you're welcome to stay and attend our worship at 10.
Can I say something to that? Talking about the children?
This is your time.
This is the one thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Was the, Matthew 18. Was being childlike, enter the gates of heaven. I'm talking about, some people talk about, now that I'm older, and you talk about an author, I'm older, and it's sort of like, I don't care anymore. I love that, like, I don't, that audacity that you get later in life. But that audacity that you come in with. That I have two small daughters, and I was inspired by my nieces and nephews and how this little being came from wherever it came from, with the cosmos in its eyes, and it was full and complete and new. I thought that a person came in, thing you had to develop, and I was like, no, you just have to teach them how to express what they inherently show up. You pull up your family at the cosmic bus stop, and somebody gets on, and that's who you get, and it's amazing. And then you just have to help, you just have to facilitate their success. But the thing that was amazing is that the children they haven't been taught how to govern. And they know, they have anything that I say, or anything that any religious person speaks to you, the only reason you agree with it is that something inside you says, I agree with that. And that is inherent. You come in with this thing that knows what is good and what is not. At that deep, deep level. You agree with the belief system because something inside you says, that's right on. And I go, where does that come from? You just come with that. And in the middle, we get caught up in ego and persona and status and ambition and how I'm gonna be judged and fight and compete and all this worldly stuff. And then at the end, we go like, oh, what was all that about? And we return to this childlike space, not childish, but childlike. And that's something that I have, like I said at the beginning, where I introduced myself as like a Robin Williams or George Carlin or Alan Watts or a Mr. Rogers. I'm very fond of these wise fools, of this paradox of being able to be young and old. When you are young, that old person is there in the young person. The old sage is present and is guiding the young person. And when you become the sage, the young person is there to guide the sage. And that's the paradox of another paradox. They're always there. And with the children, if you have the ability to be around children and be around children and not tell them, and like just be a child with a child. Like, my goodness, I'm getting buckled. But like being around a kid is incredible. And being around an old person who has that audacity to be free is just like being around a child. And if you can hold that through the middle, or if you can spread that with other people and give them that safety, if you can be childlike, then I can be childlike. I think that's what there kind of is. And in the middle, there's this sort of, it becomes dangerous because those things that, mine, gimme, boundaries, you're different, we get caught up in that. But if you can hold on to that, can I play in the sandbox with you? Yeah. For your whole life. And just be like, you're different and you're weird. And I love that you're different and weird. And I'm different and weird too. And let's play. That for me is like, that's where it's at. And so I'm happy to hear that, that later in life that you're becoming childlike. But also to look at how wise the children are. And I love that. And that was the big thing I wanted to talk about, was childlikeness is something that's so always been big for me, working in games and all that sort of stuff, holding on to that play and joy. I think, there's a tendency for somberness because we find an importance in religiosity or spirituality. But I always go like, well, where's the play and joy? Creativity, imagination. Imagination is divine. I mean, creation, imagination is the source of everything. And it comes from this ineffable, non-physical space. And then that's the kingdom of heaven. And may it be that way on earth. And we bring it out. We take these abstract things and we are portals to manifest that here. And I just, we can manifest anything. And I go, well, why don't we manifest Disney World? Like, why isn't everything, why don't we manifest peace and playfulness and precariness, all those things? I mean, they all say the thing, but I look at the kids and the old, and I find that it's the best there, but I think that really the children are
It's a circle.
Yeah.
We come back.
Yeah.
The circular connection.
I love to watch children's artwork before they learn what art is supposed to be.
Yes.
In our bathroom, we have a painting that our son did when he was probably 4. Before he went to school and learned how to draw trees and people. And it's just so pure, I love looking at it in the mirror when I'm brushing my teeth.
When I went to Marguerite's, when we were looking at her preschool, and I was walking through the halls, I didn't hear anything the teacher was saying on the tour because I was just like waves of the color and the choices and it's just the raw creation. And I asked the teacher at the end, I'm like, I'm sorry I didn't hear anything that you said, but can I come back and tour and just look at the children's artwork? Because it was just so moving and
It expressed things that, my son did a painting, when he was like 5. It's so Freudian. It's in the bathroom, probably the appropriate place, and it is so, my wife does it, I go, oh my goodness, how can you miss it? It's just there. And it made me think, Freud was he was wrong about a lot of things. But he was sure onto some things. And, but just the magic of kids, and it is true. I look back sometimes, realize I didn't appreciate what I had when I had young kids as much as I could.
but you have
I
young
was
kids.
working a lot.
They're around everywhere.
Yeah, I know. I still get a chance, right?
In congregation, yeah.
You've never even hinted at cynicism.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you guys.
Cynicism.
What about cynicism?
Well, I don't hear it in anything today, and that's the enemy, isn't it? Am I,
Yeah.
I like the idea of Sasquatches and the Indian laws and the portals
Yeah.
but I can't allow those things, cause I'm cynical about that.
Well, why? Because you're protecting yourself from the shame of
Yes,
a fantasy, right? Or the shame
Yes.
of being wrong.
yeah, it's a real blockage.
Yeah, give it up. Go for it.
Give it. Even if they laugh at me when I
Yeah,
talk about
laugh.
Sasquatch.
I believe in fairies. Because like the pervasiveness of little people in every culture.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about, but like I go, this has to be something there. Everybody, even if it's a collective fantasy, there's this idea of a tulpa or an egregore. And it's the idea that like Santa Claus, Santa Claus is absolutely real. Santa Claus is real. And remember, it's like Santa Claus is not really like, you're missing the point. Jesus is an egregore or a tulpa too. There's a concept with a set of rules, like a memory of our grandparents, that we enact in the world like Christ, right? Even though it's not here, these are the rules by which that thing plays, and it says that we should behave this way and that we act on its behalf and manifest its will in the world. And so like, fairies could be real. What are the rules what is the character in the definition of Sasquatch or this or that, or what would it do, or what would it have us do? Sasquatch maybe not a good example, but Christ might be a better example. And then we manifest this through our collective behaviors. And so like, that's, I encourage people to be mindful of the stories that you tell, the things that you watch and consume, and the way that you project into the world, because we're making that all the time. It was, I got that from church. And so, yeah, and don't have shame, because every fantasy is such a wonderful source and that mystery, that awe, that's the question mark. There's a divine thing in UFOs and Sasquatch and Loch Ness Monster, and because it engages that childlike, like anything is possible. It reignites that mystery that you have as a child, because that is ever present. That doesn't go away simply because people get guarded and they want to feel very safe and free from judgment and shame and, fallibility. But, we still don't know how lightning works or gravity. Basic things are like what water really is. There's all these, we don't know. The Big Bang is a mystical assumption, and we just say that that's science. But, so it's all fantasy. It's just, I hope that you empower yourself to just like have at that. That's where the good stuff is. Is in those unknowable things. Unicorns. There are horses that have one horn. So.
Can you tell that he's the father of 2 little girls?
Well, but this goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, paradox. And the whole world of creative potential, in a way, is a paradox, because people will say it doesn't exist, and yet it does. And that's the magic of creative potential.
Absolutely.
Wow. Ben, can't thank you enough.
Oh, thank you.
Opening up a lot of questions that there are, or nice reminder, there are more questions than answers, and maybe that's the way it always should be. And a great reminder, first, and a nice reminder that oftentimes people in the sanctuary tell me they can feel when the spiritual enrichment folks start walking in, they can feel it. We're bringing an energy in there every time. They can just see it in our faces, or maybe they can feel it in other senses. But we're full of a lot of different types of energy. And so let's bring it in again today. And thanks again for coming. Next week, everybody, we're going to be hearing from a member of Just Harvest in Rogers Park to tell us about their great works. So hope to see you again. Thanks again, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Does your daughter get her question?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, yeah, Marguerite, did you want to ask a question?
Okay, here's your question.
I love playing with you.
She says she loves playing with you, Poppy.
Oh, I love playing with you so much.
Do you have a question for Poppy? Remember we were talking about what questions are? Did you come up with a question? Like, what's your favorite color? What are some things that you love about life? Do you have a good question for Poppy?
I like playing with you with paint.
Oh, she just says she loves to paint with you, Poppy.
Oh, I love to paint with you too. When I get home, we'll paint some more, okay?
Okay. We love you. I'm so proud of you, honey. You're incredible. What a word.
Thank you, girls.
And I love and I had just a little quiet time with Joy.
She just had a little bit of quiet time with Joy, our bulldog.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so beautiful.
We love you, honey. See you soon.
See you soon, girls. I'll be home in a little bit.
Okay.
All right.
If you can't make it to the February 22nd, do you have a calendar of when you do other events?
So I used to do this almost every week in Chicago in a large space. We could fit about 40 people. And I would do it somewhere between 4 and 8 times a month for about a decade. And then COVID eliminated that large space venue that I had. And I haven't gone, and I had got married and had my daughters, and I haven't done it publicly for about 5 years. I'm looking now, I've moved to the North Shore. I live in Northbrook, and I'm looking for venues that will, that will fit and accommodate the gongs. We'll see how the congregation likes what I have to offer, and if I can offer it here again. But I'm looking for more to build a calendar for the year. I have a newsletter, I have a website, benjaminsavage.com, that my wife made the website, and it has to be updated a little bit. But I'm planning to get back into offering it again regularly. And I do really recommend it, like, if you experience the gongs, to do it twice, because the first time you're like, okay, that's what that's about. And then the second time, you have a bit of assumption of what it is, and then you get caught off guard again because it will be different the second time, your response. And it sort of accumulates over time, but at least two, it's kind of like when you taste a new thing, you take a bite and then you taste it, taste it again.
And then Malin Pollock, who co-founded the agents, the advertising and branding agency that did the rebranding for us and our logo and all of that. She's from Wilmette. And she belongs to a church in Wilmette, comes here sometimes because of her involvement in helping us with our communication. She was interested in introducing having a gonging in a venue in Wilmette as well. So that could be, maybe we can do it twice here, twice or whatever.
Yeah.
Just that she was very interested and she knows
Okay,
you,
great.
okay, so.
So trying to get a picture of the right spaces, is it the larger the better? Should I have like a room like the sanctuary so it can reverberate further?
Well, I mean, chapels, acoustically beautiful, those are great. And small spaces are really, really great too. The main thing is you just want it to be a place that won't be interrupted. Because when you get into, when you do the gong thing, there's a period where you become very vulnerable and you're very open. And you don't want to sort of shatter that moment that you're in. It can be disruptive. Afterwards, you can feel sort of upset, so you really want to make sure that it doesn't necessarily have to be, pristinely silent or anything like that. That venue was next to the L tracks and people would not even notice that an L train was blasting by because they were in such a deep state. And so, but it's a matter, you just don't want anybody to poke you or do things, walk by or open a door. So it's sort of that. And then I can kind of test the space. You come in and feel how it, feels or sounds. Cool.
Ryerson Woods has a really nice
Yes.
room, and they're also building a new education building,
Such a good point.
which
Oh, yeah.
might be worth looking.
Yeah. I used to offer too, speaking of the woods, at Swallow, but not, what is it, Starbuck. Once a year I would offer a free event in a grotto,
Oh, wow.
outside, and then after the gongs end, you have sort of a heightened, your senses are heightened, and I would encourage people to go silently just interact with the nature and have a new appreciation for that. So that, being in the woods too, deer will come up too, which is interesting. Animals will curiously approach, which you would think it would drive them away, since it's a bit of a dim, but they come straight at it, which is, because you're like, oh, there's deer here, so that happens too sometimes, things
Do
like
you
that.
have to be lying down?
You don't have to be lying down, you can sit, however you want, you just want to be comfortable. So yeah, as a preface to the performance, you just want to make sure that you're very comfortable, and I tell people, usually we'll lay down on mats and blankets and pillows and very cozy, like you're taking a nap, and very comfortable clothes, and remove any sort of like jewelry or belts or shoes or, but if people are comfortable sitting, or if we're in a situation with chairs, or you just want to make sure you have like a back support or something, so you don't get too caught up in your physical discomfort, right? Because it will be distracting. And there also too is, there are moments where your body can address a physical issue, and that may be uncomfortable for a period of time. So you want to make yourself, and then it will dissipate. But there are moments where, like, also feel like if you have like an old injury, it might remind you that that's there, and it might make that become uncomfortable for a period of time, and then it will release. But so you want to be as comfy as you can.